Hey guys, Twiglets2 here, back with another Rise of Nations tutorial. Today we have my top 10 tips for new and returning players to help them get back into the game. Basically everything I wish I'd known when I first started playing. If you're a more experienced player, there might be one or two tips in here for you too. If you find the video useful, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more Rise of Nations content and regular live streams. Without further ado, let's get into number 1. As you know, there are a ton of technologies in Rise of Nations to be researched. Keeping track of when they can be researched, let alone from which building, you may as well make me sit an exam in a foreign language. Fortunately, there is a time-saving technique that will change your life, and that's why it's earned its spot at number 1 on this list. All you need to do to keep track of your technology is press the tab key. What that will do is go through every single building, it will cycle through them that has technology available to be researched. So if you're looking for one specifically and you can't remember the building, just press tab and you'll find it in no time. If you just want to remind yourself which technologies are available to be researched right now, just tap tab a few times, you'll cycle through the buildings and you will see everything that is available to be researched, including at the library. This is such a time saver. I don't even know how I played the game before I discovered pressing tab. That's why it's number 1 on this list. Tip number 2 focuses on water, in particular rivers. They don't just look pretty. They actually have 2 very big impacts on the game. The first of these is you'll notice that your troops move very slowly through rivers. So if you're moving through them, get your guys out of there right away and only cross them when you need to. The second, probably more importantly, your troops, when in a river, will take twice as much damage. Yes, you heard that correctly, double the damage while they're in a river. So, it goes without saying, avoid going through rivers unless you absolutely have to. When you need to get across one, do it quickly, and obviously, you want to be ambushing your opponent when their troops are in rivers. Not only that, but you'll notice that on certain maps, the rivers kind of snake around. So something you could do as a defensive measure is place a city in one of those S-bends in the middle there. It's almost like a moat halfway around your city. And it's a great defensive measure because if anyone tries to attack it, their troops are going to have to move slowly through the river while also taking double the damage. That's something that can really boost your city defense, and that's why rivers have to go at tip number 2. Tip number 3 is to help you more efficiently allocate new citizens to the job that you want them to do. Now, you could do this by every time a new citizen is created, manually click on them and just click on the task that you want them to do. But that takes ages. What you want to do, let's say you want to create 3 citizens and you want all of them to go onto that city's woodcutter camp. What you do is when they're being created, you tap on W. What that does is creates a rally point signified by a tiny flag on the woodcutter camp. You'll notice as soon as those citizens are created, they will go to that woodcutter camp. That frees you up to go fight a battle or look at another city, because you know as soon as those citizens are created, they're going to go to that woodcutter camp. The same can be said for farms. All you have to do is tap F. You'll see a bunch of flags show up on that city's farms, and the new citizens will go to any farms that are vacant. The same again can be said for a mine. Tap M and the same will happen. It's a much more efficient way of creating citizens. Tap, tap, tap. You know where you want them to go. You want them to go on farms. Tap F, go off and do something else because you know as soon as they're created, they're going to go straight to a farm. It's a big time saver, and that's why it's at number 3. Tip number 4 relates to my absolute favorite building in Rise of Nations, the Temple. Now, this has a ton of useful technologies, but one feature I wanted to focus on in particular is the fact that a temple will add hit points to the city that it's built near. Now let's take an example say you've got 3 cities or you've got your 3rd under construction. It's not really worth at the beginning of the game having a temple at each city. It would be nice, but you probably need the resources to be allocated elsewhere. So what you need to do is prioritize. Which city do you think is most likely to be attacked? That is the one where you want to build your temple. It's going to add the hit points to that city to make it more difficult for your enemy to take it. Something that you could even do is, if you don't have a temple at the city that's being attacked, and you'll see that AI do this quite a lot, just build a temple straight away. If you manage to finish it before they've managed to sack the city, you'll add those hit points on straight away, and it will just take the enemy a little bit longer to do. Now, the amount of hit points that the temple adds can be increased through technologies, to the extent that later in the game, sometimes it's worth just, when you're attacking a city, taking out the temple first, then taking out the city, because of the sheer number of hit points that the temple adds on. It's really an important strategic decision early-ish on in the game, so that's why I've made this list today. Tip number 5 is all to do with creating new units for your army and getting them where they need to be quickly and efficiently. Now, what most RTSs allow you to do is select the unit creation building and create a rally point somewhere on the map. Your new units are created and they will head straight there. Something that Rise of Nations does that not all RTS games do. You can create that rally point on another unit. So effectively a movable rally point. What I tend to do is put that on your Patriot unit, which should be at the center of your army at pretty much all times. And it's the perfect rally point. Not only that, but if you've already created a control group for your army by selecting them all and doing, say, Control 1, if you set the rally point of one of those units that are already in a control group, any new units that are spawned that are automatically rally pointed to that unit will join the control group. So it makes managing your control groups a little bit easier as well. And then if you don't like the rally point that you created, you could always create a new one, or if you want to remove it completely, just hold Shift and then R, and it'll just get rid of it. Simple as that. Now that we've finished tip number 5, that means we're officially halfway. If you're still with me, I hope that means you're enjoying the video and that you're finding this video useful. So feel free to support the channel. On to tip number 6. For this one, we're talking about the Patriot unit. So I'm assuming you either have the expansion for Thrones and Patriots or the extended edition, which I'm assuming is most of you. So first of all, you get your Patriot when you go into the Second Age, build your Senate, and then you have to choose from one of the governments. Then you get your Patriot unit. Firstly, do that as soon as possible. But the thing that the game isn't great at telling you is that your Patriot unit provides an armor bonus to the surrounding army within its radius. So, number 1, have a Patriot. Number 2, keep it with your army. And this armor bonus really does make a difference. If you're facing a more powerful army, whether it's bigger or, you know, just more technologically advanced, the armor bonus, if they're not using it and you are, it really can make the difference and turn the tides of a battle. So it's definitely worth using. It's also worth mentioning that generals do offer this bonus as well, but considering once you have a Patriot, once they die, they just come back for free 30 seconds later. They're a lot easier to manage than having a general that you'd have to pay for each time, plus a Patriot does a whole bunch of other things as well. So generals do it too, but a Patriot is really where you want to start and where you want to focus on. This next tip follows on quite nicely from the previous tip to do with Patriots, but this is to do with the forts, which when you're a new player, it can just feel like a step too far to think about building forts, and let alone the technology that they have to research. But there's actually one in particular that's worth knowing about early on in the game. So when you reach military 3, there's a tactics research in the fort. And what that does is it upgrades your generals and spies and your Patriot unit too. So this armor bonus I was talking about before that gets upgraded, as well as a bunch of other stuff as well. So it just upgrading your Patriot, basically you're upgrading your army as well because of the passive bonuses that they pass on. It's actually really powerful. It makes that armor bonus even more powerful. But it's one of those technologies that's just so hard to miss, particularly if you're not really bothering to build a fort in the first place. So it comes a bit later in the game, but build a fort and go for tactics and all of the subsequent research after that, you will definitely feel the benefit. Next up, we have tip number 8. We're at number 8. This may not come naturally to some, particularly if you've not really played an RTS game before, but what you can do when you're telling your units where to go, you can actually queue up a particular path, which can be really useful. All you need to do is hold down the Shift key, and each time you click, you can see that you'll be setting up a path which is indicated by flags for your units to follow. This can be really useful for scouting, for ruins at the beginning. You should definitely be doing that with your citizens so that they're scouting efficiently. But you can also do it with your whole army to avoid your opponent's defenses and just control them in that way. It's a really useful feature, and if you want to add to the path that already exists, let's say you have citizens that are already scouting, but you want to add on to it without removing what they already have, select citizen, hold down Shift, that will show you the flags that they've already got, and then you can click some more to add onto that path that they already have. It's a really useful feature that will be easy for some coming from other RTS games, but not so obvious for others. It's just great, particularly if you're a control freak. We have 2 tips left, so let's go straight into tip number 9, and we're back with our friend the Patriot unit because they are the best unit in the game. Now, when you get into the second age, build your Senate building, you will get a choice of governments. You could either go for despotism or you could go for a republic. This tip is if you go for a republic and you get a senator. They have loads of awesome features that they can use. They're all very powerful, but there's one in particular that I wanted to highlight, which is the fact that they can bribe enemy units that are within your own territory. This is a brilliant defensive measure, and you definitely need to be using it. Now, when I talk to a lot of people, they like to play the game quite defensively, just playing against the AI and holding them back. One of the best things you can do is have your senator, and when you're doing that defending, try to bribe one of the enemy's strongest units, take them away from their army, and add them to your army. Now, of course, you can bribe with spies, but similarly to getting a patriot rather than having a general, it's just easier to have a patriot and a lot cheaper as well, and they're much more powerful. So it just makes sense that if you're going to start bribing, do it with your patriot first if you're going to go down the senator route, which a lot of people do. We're finally here with the last tip, tip number 10. And it's such a big one. You actually do it before you even go into the game. Go into the game options and then go into the game tab. And you'll see a little section in the top left. It's called, auto citizen and citizen delay. Now what these do, you can first of all select when you have an idle citizen, what do they do? So they can do nothing, or they can construct buildings, or they can gather resources, or they can do both. You definitely want them to do both. And then the second one, the slidey scale, is basically how quickly or how long do they pause before they actually start doing something for themselves without you telling them what to do. And of course, you want that to be as soon as possible. Now, more experienced players will know exactly what their citizens are doing. They'll be using the shortcuts and hotkeys to ensure they're doing exactly what they want straight away. But certainly as a newer player, when you're creating citizens, you're not really going to be keeping on top of everything. But at least if you have it set that they can either build a building or gather resources as soon as possible after they're created, you can rest assured that they're going to be doing something useful pretty quickly. It's such an essential tip, particularly when you're starting off, which is the whole point of this list, that I thought I'd put that as number 10. I'm afraid, my friends, we've reached the end of the video. Those are my top 10 tips for new and returning players. As a new player, or when you were a new player, which things really helped you develop, or which things were the eureka moment that you just found something that really made the game a lot easier? For me, it's definitely tip number 1. Someone told me, oh, just press tab and you'll cycle through all the technology. It changed my life. It was amazing. If you liked the video, found it useful, please hit that like button and do consider subscribing for more Rise of Nations content and regular live streams. Feel free to check out the rest of my playlist of Rise of Nations tutorials. I hope to see you soon, perhaps in the next video, or maybe even one of my live streams. But for now, long live Rise of Nations.